There are thoughts you're allowed to have, thoughts you're rewarded for, thoughts that get applause, promotion, validation, likes, and then there's the one you're not supposed to touch, not because it's offensive, not because it's false, but because it fractures the framework of everything you've ever been taught to trust. This isn't just a thought, it's the root frequency, the buried code, the thought that doesn't sit in your mind but builds the very room you think inside of. From childhood, your perception was shaped, not by truth, but by repetition. You weren't taught to explore reality. You were taught to obey the version handed to you. The world wasn't explained to you. It was installed. School didn't open your mind. It formatted it. Media didn't inform you. It narrated your reality before you had a chance to question it. And underneath all of it, religion, politics, science, culture, there's one constant message. Don't trust your inner knowing. Trust the system. But what happens when you no longer do? What happens when a thought arises from somewhere deeper, not from memory, not from logic, but from remembrance? A thought that says, what if none of this is solid? What if none of this is fixed? Not the laws, not the facts, not even the ground you're standing on. That's not insanity, that's the beginning of lucidity. You've spent a lifetime being trained to think within a grid. This is your invitation to think around it, to go past the painted walls of logic and discover that reality isn't built with facts. It's built with belief, and belief isn't passive, it's constructive. It weaves the code of your life's experience. So here's what they never told you. Reality doesn't wait for your actions. It responds to your assumptions. It reflects your inner agreements. It mirrors your most quiet expectations. What you believe you see. What you doubt fades. What you surrender to commands you. And what you remember rewrites the rules. And so the forbidden thought is this: you were never inside a world. You were inside a mirror, and you've been looking for answers from a reflection, never realizing you're the one who posed the question. Imagine standing in front of a mirror your entire life and believing the reflection came first. That's how most people live, reactive, responding to what they think is happening to them, never realizing it's echoing from within. This is the illusion the system depends on, that reality is external, that life is something you watch, and that control lies outside of you. But ancient initiates knew better. They didn't ask, what is real? They asked, who is writing it? In the Hermetic tradition, the universe was described not as matter, but as mind. Not poetic metaphor, literal structure. All is mind. Everything experienced is mental in origin. Not just the way you perceive things, but the things themselves. They emerge from thought. They are stabilized by shared belief. The more people agree with a belief, the more real it becomes, until it hardens into something called truth. And here's the danger. When enough people share a false belief, it becomes reality, even if it was never real to begin with. That's how systems are maintained, not with weapons, with agreement. You're not being forced into the simulation. You're participating in it. Every time you say, that's just how it is, you reaffirm the code. Every time you accept a limitation as fact, you lay another brick in the psychic wall. But what happens when you stop agreeing? What happens when you interrupt the loop? That's what this video is, a glitch. An echo of your own higher awareness, reminding you that none of this is permanent. None of it is absolute. Not time, not identity, not even gravity. Every law of your world bends under the force of conscious perception. If you've ever had a day where time seemed to stretch, or a moment of déjà vu so sharp it felt engineered, that wasn't coincidence. That was a signal, the code reacting to you. And what they never want you to know is this: you don't just influence reality. You write it, line by line, assumption by assumption, thought by thought. But here's the twist. Most of your thoughts aren't yours. They were implanted, wrapped in familiarity, fed to you through language, culture, trauma, routine. They're so deeply embedded, you can't tell where you end and the programming begins. And that's by design, because the system doesn't fear rebellion. It fears remembrance. It fears the moment you stop asking for permission, the moment you stop trying to fix the world and start realizing you are not inside the world. You're generating it. Not metaphorically, mathematically. So when you change the generator, you change the world. Let's break the illusion even further. You've been taught that thought is passive, something that happens inside your brain. But your brain isn't the source. It's a receiver, a tuner, a local processor for something non-local. Thought doesn't start in your neurons. It starts in the field, the space around you, the energy that pulses with memory, intention, and probability. When you have a thought, you're not creating it. You're accessing it, tuning into it. That's why great ideas come out of nowhere. Why intuition feels more true than logic. Why synchronicities seem tailored just for you. Because they are. Your life isn't a random string of events. It's a mirror of your dominant frequency. What you expect, you attract. What you fear, you amplify. What you accept, you manifest. And here's the most uncomfortable truth. Most people's lives are not the result of choice, but of mental submission. They agreed to a program that was never theirs. Wake up, obey, produce, entertain, sleep, repeat, and they call that freedom. But you're here, listening, reading between the lines, which means something inside you remembers the deeper script, remembers that your thoughts were never meant to be tamed. They were meant to be tools, not to survive reality, but to rewrite it. So what are you doing with that power? Are you spending it on loops, on doubt, on fear that doesn't belong to you? Or are you finally ready to see what happens when you write your reality with intent? Because the moment you do, the code shifts. Subtle at first, a sense of alignment, moments clicking together, events arriving before you ask, and eventually, you realize the world isn't happening to you, it's responding to you. You are no longer the effect, you are the origin. This isn't theory, it's physics, it's metaphysics, it's personal. If this message feels like it was meant for you, it probably was. Subscribe now and hit the bell so the system doesn't choose what you remember next. Because from this point forward, nothing stays the same. Let's talk about silence, because that's where this all begins and ends. Not the kind of silence filled with noise in your head, not the kind that comes with headphones or distraction, but real silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl, because you're finally alone with your true signal. Most people avoid that silence their whole lives. Why? Because it reveals the fracture, the echo between who they are and who they were told to be. In silence, conditioning starts to lose its grip. The cultural overlay dissolves. The narratives, political, religious, even spiritual, start to sound like background noise, and something older begins to emerge. Something raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable at first, because it doesn't sound like anything you've been taught. But then, it starts to resonate. That's where the forbidden thought lives, in the space between. It doesn't arrive like a bolt of lightning. It's not theatrical, it's subtle, a flicker, a recognition that reality is not only bendable, but already bent by your unconscious will. And the moment you see it, really see it, there's no unseeing it. You start noticing patterns you didn't place, words that repeat, themes that stalk you, numbers that whisper. And it becomes obvious your life is scripted, but not in the way you feared, not by some external overlord, by you. The deeper you, the version of you that never forgot, the one who planted this very video in your timeline as a signal, a breadcrumb, a map back to center. This is not spirituality, this is sovereignty. And this is why silence is feared, because in silence, you remember your own voice, and your voice is the vibration that commands the structure around you. Every ancient system knew this. Temples were built to tune the field. Mantras were written to shape vibration. Sacred geometry wasn't decorative, it was functional. You weren't supposed to live in boxes, or work in grids, or speak in reduced alphabets. You were meant to resonate, but they stripped the frequencies from your food. They flattened the waveforms in your music. They pixelated your visions. They scattered your attention. Why? Because a fragmented mind can't remember what it is. And if you don't know what you are, you don't know what you're capable of. But here's the crack in the system. Even a forgotten truth still vibrates. Even a buried code still pulses beneath the surface. And if you're still listening, you're feeling it now. That shift, that chill, that alignment. You didn't find this thought. This thought found you because you're ready. Now comes the cost. Because with power comes the part no one warns you about. Accountability. It's easy to live in the narrative of the victim. To say, they did this to me. To believe the system is what shapes your fate, to wait for rescue or signs or someone else to change. But the forbidden thought destroys all that. It leaves you with nothing to hide behind, no excuses, no distractions, just the raw truth. You were always the signal. You chose your patterns, maybe unconsciously, but you chose them, and that's not something to fear. That's the key, because the same mechanism that traps you can also free you. If thought built your reality, then thought can reprogram it, but only when it's conscious. And that's the line between the programmed human and the awakened architect. One reacts, the other selects. Most people don't live, they loop. They replay the same mental sequences, the same emotional reactions, because they've never questioned the source code. They mistake familiarity for truth and comfort for alignment. But comfort is the most sophisticated prison. because it never forces you to look deeper, to wonder why you always attract the same type of people, why money slips through your hands, why your ideas die before they're born, why your life feels like it was already written, but not by you. Here's the truth. It was written, but the author wasn't fate, it wasn't karma, it wasn't God. It was the sum total of your unexamined thoughts. And now you stand at the point of reauthorship, not just editing your script, but tossing the pages, setting fire to the plot, and deciding what story comes next. But beware, this isn't manifestation hype. This isn't a hack. It's a full nervous system reboot, because once you realize the world responds to you, you can no longer afford to live unconsciously. You can't afford scattered attention, fake friendships, mindless habits. Why? Because every signal you emit shapes the next frame of your life. Every belief you allow becomes law. So what laws have you written without realizing it? That love must hurt? That success must cost you your health? That your voice isn't worth hearing? That your dreams are too late? Those aren't truths. They're contracts, silent agreements, energetic permissions. And the moment you revoke them, the system scrambles. Reality realigns. Because your signal just changed, and the field always listens. This is the part they can't control. Not with data, not with dopamine, not with distraction, because this part doesn't exist on their grid. It exists in you, beyond your name, beyond your story, beyond even your mind. It's the observer behind the thought, the writer behind the character, the signal behind the signal. And when that part wakes up, even for a moment, the world bends. It doesn't shatter, it doesn't explode, it just reconfigures. You begin to meet people who vibrate like memory. You start seeing patterns in places you never looked. You speak less, but your words cut deeper. You stop trying to heal because you realize you were never broken. You were only distracted from what you always were. And here's the paradox. You don't become something new. You remember something ancient, something that's been speaking to you through every failure, every coincidence, every sleepless night. It's been using signs, dreams, shadows, triggers, whatever it had to get your attention. And now it has it. So what now? Do you go back to forgetting? Pretend this video was just interesting? Slide into the next dopamine drip? Or do you pause? Do you feel the echo? Because if you do, if you hold that frequency even for a few seconds longer, something starts to shift. Not on the screen, not in your notifications, but in the geometry of your day, in the way people look at you, in what shows up when you stop looking, and eventually, in who you become when no one's watching. This is not an ending, it's a trigger, a reset point, a doorway you didn't know was there until you walked through it. There are other videos here, but they're not just content. They're activation codes. Each one is waiting for a different version of you. Each one is a mirror, reflecting who you're becoming, frame by frame. So if this one found you now, ask yourself, which one is waiting for you next? And before you go, answer this. What belief have you carried your whole life that you're now ready to rewrite? Drop it in the comments, because the moment you name it, you start to dissolve it. And when others read it, they might remember their own. Reality is written by the bold, and you just picked up the pen.